Now, what is priority? As an entry level product manager, one of your first tasks might be to write a PRID. Will most likely be to write a PRID. So, two of your first tasks might be user research or market research and writing a PRD. Now, the PRD is one of the documents that is primarily owned by the product manager. With user research, you can have a UX researcher conduct it. A product designer sometimes conducts user research as well. So there are some functions that a product manager does that is also shared with the product team, but the PRD is your primary responsibility. And so you have to know how to write it well because it informs the product, right? It informs the product design stage, it informs the development stage, it informs QA, it informs sales, it informs marketing strategy, it informs a lot of things. And so you have to it is the foundation of a solid product. A solid PRD is the foundation of a solid product. Now, what is a PRD? PRD is product requirement document, and it is a document used to gather expected requirements of the product during the product development stage. This document is usually shared within the product team and sometimes with relevant cross-functional stakeholders. And if you remember in week one, we discussed the makeup of the core product team, and then there are other cross-functional stakeholders like customer success, sales, finance, even the CEO that the product manager will interface with. And depending on the nature of the future, these other stakeholders will take a look at your priority. Imagine that you are launching a savings and investment product, which is primarily has a lot of financial talk. So it means already you are interfacing with the finance team outside of your core product team that is made up of your product designer, your developer, and your product marketer. You're going to also be interfacing with the sales team, and you will factor in this information in your PRD, and they are most likely even legal team because of compliance or things like terms and conditions. They are more likely to look at your PRD. Now, how do we write a PRD? Different people have different recommendations for how a PRD is written, but in my experience, the basic outline that I think that you cannot go wrong with is what I'm about to share with you now. If you go on Google and Google how to write a PRD, there are a plethora of options and formats and templates on how to write a PRD. Some are really long, some are not as long. Some people have even said abolish the PRD. I disagree because, like I said, it is very, very important for the product development stage and it is foundation of a solid product. Now, here's a basic outline that, in my experience, has worked for me and I highly recommend. And even a couple of resources on Google also recommend this template. So, first of all, objective and goals. This is the first section in a PRD. Now, the objective and goals explains the purpose of the future product and intended goal. You need to tell people why are we building these products? What is the problem we're trying to solve for the user? And then what is the business objective or the business goal behind building this product? It is important to start your PRD with this because it sets the tone that you are not just building a feature for the sake of putting out a product. There is a purpose, there's a company objective attached to it, and then there is also a user goal attached to it, which is solving user problem and helping achieving company objective. Those are your core one of your core responsibilities as a product manager, and it's important to document this on priority. Start your priority with objective and goals. Now, assumptions. This explains the anticipated needs of your users, which your product of future directly solves. So now, what is the product what is the problem that your product is solving? Let's say you have a fintech product, and your fintech product is the hypothesis backing your product is that you say users want to be able to perform transactions without incurring transaction charges, right? Now that is your hypothesis. An assumption will look like users are looking for a product that they can use to perform transactions without incurring transaction charges. And so you write your assumptions. It is drawn from your hypothesis of the product. Now, features, you have to list if it is a comprehensive product. Let's say you're trying to launch out your MVP, which is your minimum viable product, and it is the first iteration of your product. It means you are first of all writing a very, very comprehensive PRD first. So it's different from when you're writing a PRD for a feature, because for every feature you launch inside the product, every feature is a mini product inside the product. And now for every feature you launch, you're going to write a PRD for it. But if you're writing a PRD for an MVP, you're going to have to list the features that would exist on the product. You don't have to go into detail, but you can just list all the features that you envisage, because it also sets the tone for the roadmap. And we'll cover roadmap next week. But it also sets the tone for the roadmap because now you know that we are launching 5 features inside this MVP, and then it informs your roadmap eventually. We'll go into it next week, but you have to list all your features for the products. If you are writing a PRD for just a feature, then you can skip the feature section. Now, user design, the user interface, which the user will interact with at every point of their user journey on the product or feature, has to be documented on the PRD. For this segment, the product designer typically has he is or she is, whoever they are the decision maker for the product design, because they are the experts, right? However, you can document how you envisage the user interaction will be, or what the user interface will look like, and you do this with wireframing. We'll talk about wireframing consequently, but you can wireframe. Wireframe is just a very low fidelity, or you can do a high fidelity, but it is not an expert rendition of what you want the UI to look like. It's just, think of it like a sketch. Now, there are tools that you can use to wireframe. You can also wireframe on your paper. That's a very low file wireframing. But think of it like a sketch, or a very rough sketch of how you want your product to look like, and then you include it on the PRD, or you can document it on another document and link it on the PRD. That is what I recommend. You link it to the PRD, and so the UI designer, the product designer, is able to see where your head is at in terms of UI design and design direction. And so it makes your first sync, because the product designer is the first stage. After your PRD, your product designer picks up your PRD and starts to implement screens before engineering even touches it. And so once your product designer looks at your PRD and he's able to see, or she's able to see, that you have wireframed how you want the user interface to look like, it also informs their own design process, and they're able to, when they ask you for a sync, your collaboration is seamless and you make more headway than they're just starting from everything is in your head and they're trying to pull out what is in your head. So you document it, and you use wireframing techniques or wireframing tools to also show like a low fidelity view of what you envisage user interface should look like. Now, functional requirements, this is for engineering. This entails the end system or application that will support the product. So is it an app? Is it a mobile app? Is it a web product? Is it Android or iOS? You have to include this information on the PRD. And then you have to now break down the user journey into functional requirements for the developers to pick up. So let's say an example is, let's say onboarding, you want a form, you want, when they click on the button for get started, a form comes up, they fill the form, they click on the next CTA button, another form comes up. You have to document these things clearly for the developers to understand, because especially the backend developer, he reads or she reads the PRD, they read the PRD, and then they go to Figma, and they're able to make sense between the PRD and the screens on Figma. Figma is a design tool that product designers use to design screens that will go on the app. So when the engineer looks at your PRD and they go on Figma, they are able to now make sense of what the direction of the product will look like. So being very clear in terms of functional requirements is very important. Now, future dependencies, and this is for existing. This is this is usually for features that already exist. Let's say you've already put out your MVP and you are iterating on that product. It's already on the market. You're getting feedback. You're iterating on that product, right? Now, if you are about to launch another feature and you envisage that that feature will impact an existing feature, you communicate it on the PRD, because this also informs. Now, the developer is not thinking about the product in a holistic way. Some do, but you cannot rely on the developer thinking about the product, because the product is your responsibility as a product manager, and you have to think about the product in a holistic manner. Especially when you started to put features on top of features, you constantly have to think about the product in a holistic way and think about how one feature, or whether one feature impacts another feature. And so when you are putting out another feature, let's say you already have three features and you're launching a new feature, you have to constantly take a step back, look at the whole product as a whole, and try to understand if this feature you're about to launch impacts the other existing features. And if they do, you have to cater to it on the PRD. You have to explain to the developers how the interaction will be. For example, if you want a user to be able to navigate from one feature to the other, you have to cater to it and document it on the PRD so that the developer will code this into the product. And it also informs the QA testing process, so that whenever the QA engineer, or if you don't have a QA engineer, then the product manager tests the product. Whenever you are testing the products, you are able to refer back to the PRD to say, okay, this feature impacts this feature. So now I need to test it and see how this works. So you see how why the PRD is very important. And then edge cases. An edge case is an unexpected scenario that could occur during the user journey through the product. It is the product manager's responsibility to attempt to anticipate such scenarios. An edge case is it's not necessarily a user journey or an anticipated or unexpected user journey behavior. It is something that you might not envisage, but the user might do. Maybe they will interact with your product from another place. Or it might even be an edge case, might even be a user trying to game your product. Maybe you've already set rules for how you want users to be able to interact with your product. And then you realize that there are actually ways that user can game your product, and they can bypass your rules and still interact with the product in a way that you don't want to. So, thinking of all these scenarios helps you put stop gaps in place that will stop these occurrences from happening. And it is the product manager's responsibility. Remember, I said you have to think about your product in a holistic way, and it's your responsibility, because at the end of the day, you want to interact with your product a certain type of way. And if they are not interacting with your products according to the user journey that you have specified, then it means you didn't factor in certain edge cases and you didn't cater to them, and that can be problematic. So you need to factor that in. So that is it for week two. This is session one. In session two, we'll be covering market research and competitive analysis. And remember, I said market research goes hand in hand with user research and even competitive analysis. And it is such an interesting topic, and we'll do that. See you in session two.